Cook or to roast? That is the question. Tonight we are going to explore 5 perspectives on what seems as a strange and enigmatic commandment connected to the holiday of Pesach, articulated in the portion of Boy. At last, the night of freedom has arrived. After 210 years of living in a foreign country, a major part of that time under unbearable and excruciating conditions, subjected to torture, slave labor, barbarism, and horrible treatment, the Jewish people, the young and new Hebrew nation, is about to experience liberty. Free at last. Free at last. Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, instructs the Jewish people concerning their behavior on that night, that fateful night preceding the day when they will finally leave their oppression in Egypt. Surprisingly, the menu and the cuisine of that night's meal occupies a major place in the Torah and in the genesis of the Jewish people as a nation. That night Moses told them every family or a few families together had to bring an offering, the Karban Pesach, the Passover offering, a sheep, a lamb or a kid, the goat, and instructs them in the name of God on how to prepare that offering. Let's look inside. Please bring up source number 1. In your curriculum, you have a PDF document right below the video. The Torah says Moses commands the Jewish people, God commands Moses to command the Jewish people, V'achlu es habasar, ba'layla hazet sliesh, umatzis al meroyim yechlu. They shall eat the meat on this night, roasted on fire. Eat it together with matzah and bitter herbs. Al toichlu mimenu na. Do not eat from it. Roasted in a pot. Ubashel, or cooked in a pot with any other liquid. Mevushel bamayim, or cooked, boiled in water. Kiyim tzliesh, you must eat it roasted on fire. Roishay al krav al kirbay. Its head, roasted its head, with its leg, with its innards. I translated, I know some of my friends listening will comment on the translation of na. Don't eat it na. What does na mean? I translated according to the Rashbam, who says na means to roast it in a pot. You put it in a pot on fire and it roasts in the pot in its own liquids, in the liquids that come out from the very meat. So don't eat it pot roasted. Do not eat it cooked in a pot with any liquid or cooked and boiled in water. Only roasted directly on a fire without a pot. A barbecue. Rashi translates na as partially cooked. The Even Ezra translates na as raw. But whatever the translation, the bottom line is that they could not prepare this offering, this lamb or this kid, in a pot. Boiled, sauteed, roasted in a pot. Rather, it had to be roasted directly on fire. Indeed, this was the tradition every year on Passover. Every Jewish family, every Jewish household, or a few households together, would bring a sacrifice on the day before Pesach, the 14th day of the Hebrew month of Nisan, a lamb or a kid. Part of it was burnt on the altar in the temple in Jerusalem. They would go home and then roast the Korban Pesach. The Passover offering was roasted as a complete animal, as the Torah says, the head, the leg, the innards, with a spit on fire, and this became a major staple of the Seder. It would be eaten together with matzah and bitter herbs. Today, of course, without the sacrifices, without the temple and the sanctuary, we're missing that part of the Seder table. We have the matzah, we have the maror, but we don't have the Passover barbecue. We do not have the roasted meat of the Passover offering. As a memory of it, we eat the afikomon, a special piece of matzah, to commemorate the Passover offering. Now, it's in this mitzvah that we encounter in a rather moving way a profound and important idea in Judaism, namely that God, the creator of heaven and earth, is not only interested in abstract philosophical truths, in cosmic and existential ideas and issues, but rather the grand creator and orchestrator of the world is interested in your kitchen patterns and how you prepare your dinner, whether it's on the microwave, in the oven, whether you make a barbecue on the grill or in a bonfire directly. In the Jewish imagination, in the Jewish Weltanschauung, God is concerned with every detail of human existence and human affairs. Yet the question remains, why this commandment? Why did God care if the Jewish people would prepare their Passover food in another fashion? If you want to saute it, you want to roast it in a pot, you want to boil it, you want to cook it. Why the requirement and the prohibit that it must be roasted directly on fire, not even roasted in a pot? Sometimes you can roast it in a pot, you don't bring in any other liquids, it's just roasting on the pot from its own liquids. Even that was not good. It had to be, not only can't you use any liquids, water or oil or anything else, you couldn't even put it directly in a pot on fire and have it roast from its own liquids. It had to come directly in contact with the fire itself without any pot separating it from the fire, and only then did you fulfill the mitzvah. Why? We don't find this by any other sacrifice. Usually God does not care how people prepare the food. You want a barbecue gesundheit. You want to roast, you want to boil, you want to saute, you want a pot roast, put it in an oven, bake, whichever way you want to prepare your food, including the sacrifices. Many of the sacrifices were cooked and eaten by the Kohanim, by the people. How did they prepare it? How they wanted. They can cook it, they can roast it. But only by the Passover offering is there a commandment. You have to have it tzliyesh, you have to roast it. Now, don't get me wrong, I have nothing against a good barbecue. It was very nice, certainly a barbecue together with the crispy buns we call matzah. I guess that would be the modern version of the Pesach barbecue, together with some spicy or barbecue sauce they called maror, bitter herbs. It's great. But why was it a moral and divine obligation for the Seder of the first Passover and for every Seder since, during the temple era when they would bring the Passover offering? I want to present 5 perspectives. There are more, but for this class, I think 5 will suffice. Let's present first the literal explanation presented by the author of Sefer HaChinuch, the Book of Education, a brief encyclopedia of all the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah with a concise description of each mitzvah, a concise description of its basic laws, and a concise description of its reason. Says the Sefer HaChinuch, open up source number 2, please. Shenitztavinu lechel tzli dafke, lefi shekach derech b'nei melochim v'sarim lechel psar tzli. We were commanded to eat roasted food because this is the way of princes, of aristocrats, to eat roasted meat because it's a very delicious food. The rest of the nation who are more poor, more impoverished, cannot afford to eat in this style because they only have a little meat. They don't have such large quantities. So therefore the little meat that they can afford, they eat only in a cooked way in order to be able to satiate their stomachs. What he means is when you cook, when you boil, so then you put in some other substances, you put in some other ingredients, you put in some vegetables, you put in some other food. They don't have enough meat to fill them up, to satiate them. So therefore they need other substances. So therefore you cook it in a pot, you prepare it in a pot or in an oven. You roast or bake in an oven or you cook in a pot. But the aristocrats, the wealthy princes and kings, they can afford endless quantities of meat. So therefore they sit and they roast and they barbecue because they can be satisfied from the meat itself. So the chinuch continues, "Va'anu shaykh lama Pesach l'zakaron sheyatzanu lecheirus liyos mamleches kohanim v'am kadosh." We are eating the Passover offering to commemorate our liberty, our liberation, to become a kingdom of princes and a holy nation. Certainly it's appropriate that we eat it in an aristocratic way, in a way of liberty and freedom and expansiveness. So the night of Passover, even the poorest Jew is a prince, is a king. Behave aristocratically, behave in an expansive, wealthy, liberated fashion. Barbecue, don't cook. And then the chinuch adds another reason. Milvad mashachilas atzli yoyra alachipazon sheyatzum b'mitzrayim v'layachlu lishus atchiz bashal b'gdeir. Roasting, barbecuing takes much faster than cooking, as anybody who barbecues knows. And they were in a rush. There was a symbolism here that there's a rush to get out of this place. And therefore, do everything swiftly. So roast it on fire rather than cook it. Two explanations in the Sefer HaChinuch. Take a look, source number 3. Another perspective completely, presented by the Das Skenim Mebalei HaTosfos. In its commentary on Parshas Bo on this mitzvah. And it's interesting. The Das Skenim brings it, he says, Pirush Raiva. It comes from the Even Ezra. Rabbeinu Avram Even Ezra, although in our published Even Ezra's in Chumash, this doesn't say, perhaps elsewhere. But this explanation that we're going to learn here is also found in Zohar, in Parshas Pinchas. It's also quoted in some Midrashim, that the Torah Shlema quotes, that Surah Hamor quotes. It's an accepted interpretation in many sources, early sources. Zakta Das Skenim in source 3, Lefishetei Avos Mitzrayim Tizbechu. The sheep was a deity. It was worshipped by the Egyptians. So for the Jewish people to slaughter it and eat it was an abomination. It was a disgrace. So the Jews might think, let's not roast it fully. Let's eat it when it's still raw so that there shouldn't be any delay of time and the Egyptians will sense what is going on, that the Jews are eating their God. Talmud Loimar al toichlu mimenu na, therefore the Torah says, don't eat it half cooked, half roasted. Roast it fully. Let it be well done. Well done. We're not in a rush. For Shema Taimru you might say, Nevashlenu nechasenu b'gdeira. Fine. We'll cook it. We'll cook it fully. When you cook it, you can cover it in the pot, so nobody will see. Talmud Loimer Abashal Mavushal Bamayim. The Torah says you can't cook it in water in a pot. It has to be out in the open, in the fire. Let everybody see. Shema Taimru you might say, okay, Lachte Charesh Vakarayim Val Yakiru Vakrayim Val Yakiru Mazos. We'll cut it up in pieces, so they won't recognize what it is. Talmud Loimer Roisha Akrav Al Kirbis. The Torah says no, you have to roast it as one complete animal, so they can recognize what it is. The Zohar adds another detail. When you cook it, you cover the pot. There's no smell. But when you barbecue, the aroma, the fragrance goes all over the place. There's no way to hide it. This then was a commandment of God, that tonight you're going to behave truly as free people. Free at last, liberated. You don't belong to the Egyptians anymore. You don't have to have any more slave mentality. Enough with your fear, enough with your mediocrity. It's time for pride, for self-expression. Don't be scared of the Egyptians. Embrace your identity and your destiny with passion, with zest, and with inner confidence and faith. This is the first symbol of freedom. And therefore, let it be exposed, what you're doing. Do it out in the open. Let them see it. Let them smell it. The Zohar explains that's the reason also he says, don't break bones. They'll afterwards see the bones. So this is the third explanation. Das Kenim Balei Tosfos. A very relevant idea today. Now, we come to number 4. Number 4 is the Maharal. The great Maharal, the rabbi of Prague, today in Czechoslovakia, lived in the 16th century, Rabbi Yehuda Liva of Prague. He wrote many works, including a work dedicated to Pesach, Gvuras Hashem, is a commentary on the Haggadah Shel Pesach. And we want to focus on the interpretation now of the Maharal of Prague. In your curriculum, in your PDF, I quoted a few lines from a long explanation of the Maharal so you could look there inside and follow his words. But here I'm going to summarize one idea the Maharal says. He says, let's understand the physical difference between what happens when you cook, boil, and what happens when you roast. Cooking is an act which assimilates. Roasting is an act which separates, rejects. When we cook, we draw several other ingredients into the object, the food we are boiling. These ingredients assimilate with the object, and the object itself absorbs and even adapts itself to the added components. It also expands, absorbing the other ingredients. And the food that's being boiled becomes soft, and it begins to disintegrate. And the longer it's cooked, the softer it becomes, and the more it disintegrates. Roasting, however, achieves exactly the reverse. Its main function is to expel, to reject. Not only does it remove all of the blood present, but it also separates all the ingredients that are not essential to the meat. As such, roasting shrinks the meat. It makes it tough and impenetrable. This then was the reason that on this night, the Jewish people had to eat a sacrifice that was roasted on fire. And the Maharal goes on to explain this in very deep philosophical terms as his style. But let me try to deduce one idea, cull one idea from the remarkable concept the Maharal is presenting to us. At this stage of Jewish history, the roasting of the meat rather than the boiling of the meat represented, it was symbolic of what type of mindset and identity they had to develop. Jewish history would, of course, bring us in contact with diverse cultures, civilizations, religions, perspectives, would force us to interact with so many different philosophies and ways of looking at the world. Some barbaric, some cultural, some aesthetic, some deeply spiritual and impressive, and some horrifying. This is the story of Jewish existence, of Jewish history. But at the first night, at the genesis of Jewish history, Zok the Maharal, at this moment Moses is telling them, tonight you cannot cook, you cannot boil. Tonight you must roast it on fire. You can't cook and boil in which the food dissolves, in which it becomes soft, in which it disintegrates, in which it expands by absorbing other ingredients. Rather, tonight the focus has to be on complete, holistic oneness and unity. Tonight you have to expel, like in a roast, expel all the other ingredients, remove the blood, reject and separate all the ingredients that are not essential to the meat. Let the meat shrink, become tough and impenetrable. Tonight the Jewish people have to define themselves completely within on rock solid foundations, not allowing other influences, other cultures, other ideas, other perspectives to penetrate them and to redefine their identity. Why? Because if at the genesis of your identity you allow yourself the influence to be influenced by other ingredients, then what can happen is you may dissolve and nothing will remain of you. So the genesis of Jewish history, the genesis of Jewish experience must have the model of tzli eish. You must build solid, impenetrable, rock-strong foundations of who you are, your identity as Jews, a singular, holistic one nation under the rulership and in a covenant with a singular God. Recognizing that there is oneness and singularity in the cosmos. No fragmentation, no split. The Jewish story is a story of oneness, of full commitment that defines the entire person 24 hours a day. The Jewish story is a story of oneness that permeates all of existence, all of history, all of the cosmos, all of life, all of reality, based on the idea that there's a oneness at the core of reality. At the beginning of Jewish history, there is no room for this fragmentation, for this disintegration. Later, once you roast it, once your meat is tough, impenetrable, you know who it is because you reject other ingredients. Once the meat expels all the ingredients that are foreign to it, and therefore it shrinks because everything that was not essential to it is gone, now you could cook. And that's why other sacrifices God doesn't mix into the Jewish menu. You want to roast, roast. You want to cook, you can cook. Now you can navigate the various influences of the world, and on the contrary, you can be enhanced, you can be enriched by genuine ideas and contributions of various civilizations over history. Fascinating. There's one exception, where the Torah does say to cook, not to roast. You know where? In Nosai, in the book of Numbers, the Nazir. The Nazirite, who was a man or a woman who consecrated himself completely to God, grows the hair, stays away from impurity, stays away from wine, from any form of intoxication, dedicates a certain period of time to complete spirituality. At the end of this stage, the Nazir brings a carbon, the Nazirite brings an offering, a ram. And there the Torah says that the forearm of the ram has to be cooked. Zroya b'sheila, has to be cooked in water. You see the difference? When the Jewish people were in Egypt for so many years, they're about to embark on a new journey. They're about to develop their identity. Here the Torah says, let the meat be impenetrable. Let the meat be rock solid. Let the meat expel any ingredient that is not essential to itself. You must first learn who you are. You must embrace your identity. You must make peace with yourself. You must experience life holistically and fully from the vantage point of Torah and Judaism without any other influence, because if not, you will not have a core and you will dissolve. You will disintegrate. The Nazir, who represents a person who already graduated immense immersion in holiness, you cook. And hence, rabbis, there were great thinkers, great contributors of Judaism. Judaism in general, its scholars, were never scared of a confrontation, of a dialogue, of so many different perspectives and philosophies. There was no lack of confidence to be able to appreciate different contributions and to be able to understand the differences, and also to be able to utilize the genuine gems that exist in various perspectives in the world as something that can only allow us to appreciate the Torah in yet a far deeper, richer, and more diversified way. To be able to see the truths of godliness within so many different aspects of wisdom and culture within the world. But if you begin right away with cooking, you don't begin with roasting, then it'll be very hard for you to weather all of the various influences, because they may just confuse you and fragment you rather than enrich you and expand your horizons and ennoble you. I thought that this explanation explains a fascinating medrash. The medrash says, look at source number 4. Bring up source number 4. The medrash says in Medrash Rabbah, Shmos Rabbah, Parshat Tesvav, Shenemar v'achlu as abasa b'layla zetz liyesh, b'shvil Avraham sheitzaltiv mekif shaneish. You have to eat the meat of the Passover roasted on fire in the merit of Abraham, whom I saved from the fire. So we have to roast our meat in fire because Abraham was saved from the fire. In fact, the word sli is also like the word, the etymology is like the word hitzaltiv, I saved. But what is the meaning of this? It's true. Abraham, the Midrash tells us elsewhere, was thrown into a furnace by Nimrod because he rejected the pagan idolatry of his father and the community and the society, and he embraced monotheism, ethical monotheism. So he was thrown into the fire. Abraham was miraculously saved from the fire. So because Abraham was saved from the fire, therefore we have to roast our meat in fire. What's the connection? It seems like a difficult connection to understand. But based on the interpretation of the Maharal, I think it's pretty clear. Because this is what Abraham represented. Abraham had to stand up to a whole world. Avraham ha'ivri, hu me'ever echad v'chol ha'olam kulei me'ever echad. He's called the Ivri, which means the side. He was on one side and the world was on another side. He had to stand up not just to his father and mother, which was hard enough, to the entire culture, to civilization, to the world. And he had to scream, Vayikru Sham b'Shem Hashem Kelelim. He had to scream, Asada Agot of the Welt. That there's a God. That there's a moral truth at the core of the universe. That we were conceived in love and that our life has purpose. He had to begin to pave the road in the jungle of history. And to give civilization and existence the dignity of having a purpose. He had to shout and declare that there's a oneness to the world, that there are duties and responsibilities, moral duties and responsibilities. And that life essentially is spiritual, is divine. A revelation. And for this he was thrown into fire and had to be plucked out miraculously. Comes the Medrash and says, because of that, when we were liberated, the first night we had to embrace our identity in a singular, holistic fashion as tzliesh. But if in the beginning of your identity as a Jew you're wishy-washy, you're spineless, you're trying to nosh from everybody. You know, people who go to the smorgasbord and they don't want to miss one dish. That dish looks good, this dish looks good. Then you will not be able to represent what a Jew is supposed to represent in the world. What the Jew is supposed to represent in the world is to revolutionize the landscape of planet Earth and to reveal that the world essentially is a divine place. To be able to generate that kiss between heaven and earth through every thought and word and action and encounter and experience. You have to be able to know who you are from within and embrace it with solidness and confidence and peace and single-mindedness, not because you're naive and not because you're closed-minded and not because you're scared And not because you're not interested and you're not curious and you're not inquisitive. On the contrary. It's because you want to be able to be you. You don't want to be split. You don't want to be fragmented into many pieces. You don't want to be cooked and become soft and you have one piece here, one piece there. You want to be solid, impenetrable, tough. Not tough in the sense of unkind, but tough in the sense that you know who you are, and then you can give the world your gift. And then you can appreciate the contributions of many people and cultures and nations and civilizations. And it will only intensify your own identity and your own commitment and your own beauty, rather than confuse you by causing you to live in ambivalence. So it's Abraham's readiness to go into the fire that challenges us on the night of Pesach to eat roast. You see how the Medrash is now explained with a new light. Let's now go to the next, fifth perspective. This perspective is based on the teachings of Chassidus, Jewish mysticism and spirituality, particularly based on a private journal that the Lubavitcher Rebbe wrote in his younger years, published in volumes known as Rishimos. These were private writings that he wrote, volume 37. And from an idea that he develops over there, we can deduce one of the great perspectives of Hasidism on this mitzvah of eating only roast. And briefly, we have to understand again the difference between cooking and roasting. Of course, when you cook or you boil, you're using fire. The fire is under the pot, but you also have water. Or if not water, other liquids. When you're roasting, there's no liquids. There's just the meat comes in direct contact with the fire without any other liquids. Even when you're roasting in a pot without liquids, but there's still a separation between the food and the fire. The pot is separating them. It's called in halacha tzli keder. It's roasted in a keder, in a pot. But there's still a pot separating the meat from the fire, and that's forbidden on Pesach. On Pesach, there's no pot, no keli whatsoever. No pot, no oven, directly in the fire. Spit, you put in the lamb, you right directly in the fire. The real thing. What's the difference between fire and water? Fire, of course, is never content. The flame on a wick is always dancing, always swaying, always licking the air, trying to rise upwards, trying to kiss heaven, so to speak. Fire is restless. Fire is never calm. Fire never relaxes. Water, on the other hand, can be contained. You can contain water in a cup, and it will be more or less tranquil in one place in a restful fashion. So in the works of Kabbalah and Hasidism, fire represents upward striving, yearning, thirst, passion, tension, restlessness, never satisfied with the status quo, never make peace with what is. You never tell a flame, okay, calm down. You have a nice wick, you have lovely oil here, you have a good log, calm down. The fire's never calm. It's always shuckeltzich and shuckeltzich. The Zohar says the reason, if you go into a yeshiva, you go into a shul, you'll see that Jewish students sit and learn Torah, and what do? They sway, meshakeltzich, back and forth. By davening, by learning. Why? So the Zohar says, because the Torah says, Neir Hashem nishmas adam, the soul is like a flame, and a flame never remains in one place. Flame always sways. Water, on the other hand, symbolizes satiation, containment, tranquility, fulfillment, calmness. Fire embodies tension. Water represents resolution. Fire represents the absence of complacency, a war against complacency. And water represents making peace with what you have, complacency. It's expressed in another facet of fire and water. Fire decomposes. Fire breaks. Fire shatters. Fire divides. Take an object and put it in fire, and the fire will challenge it to its core. Literally, no pun intended. You put something in the fire, and the fire will break it. Water, on the contrary, water is a substance that often connects. It unites things, it integrates things. So fire never accepts anything as is. You put something in fire, it shatters it, it challenges it, it breaks it. Water, on the contrary, connects. Now I want to ask you a question. What type of life should we strive for? Should we strive for a life of fire? Should we strive for a life of water? Should we yearn for a journey of endless ambition, fervor and thirst, or for an existence of tranquility and gratification? As you know, in the Far Eastern disciplines, one of the highest states a person can achieve is complete serenity, complete tranquility, no sense of tension, of searching for something more, that lack of satiation that so many of us have. As the Medrash says, Eino de meis v'chatzi ta'avosei b'yodai. You have it in your curriculum. A person doesn't die with even half of his cravings fulfilled. The Midrash says, Mi sheyesh lo imana reitzah masayim. You have $100. You want 200. Now you have 200. Arba meis. You want 4. You have 4. You want 8. The quest always continues. The question is only what the number is. But the nature is always there. So in the Far East, one of the highest states a person can reach is nirvana, all in one in all, complete state of nothingness. The mind is emptied of any sense of yearning, of trying to get somewhere. On the contrary, where you are is perfect. Just melt away in the oneness of the cosmos, in the oneness of karma. Stop yearning. We would imagine that that's what freedom is. Freedom is achieving a state in which your psyche is cleansed finally from all tension. Just be happy, be content, be complacent, be smug, for heaven's sake. Just as they say, chill out, take a deep breath, close your eyes and say, everything is perfect. Especially here in New York, as spring has finally arrived after a very long and excruciating cold winter. So go out, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and enjoy. I know my listeners in California don't know what I'm talking about, but for that you have to live in New York. That's freedom. Stop with your longing. Stop pining. Stop aspiring. Why is life a battlefield of ideas and emotions? Show me the heart unfettered by foolish dreams, and I'll show you a happy man. Stop dreaming. Accept the status quo. Comes the Talmud at the end of Tractate Brachas and declares an ideological war against this notion in the Far East. You can look it up in your curriculum. Talmidei Chachamim ein lehem menucha. Students of Torah have no rest. Well, fine, in this world. But we believe in the next world. Loi b'olam hazeh v'loi b'olam haba. Not in this world and not in the next world. Come on. Enough that I have to run and try to catch my tail in this world. In the next world, give me a little menucha, give me a little rest. Zog the Gemara nein. The Talmud says no. Ein le menucha loy b'olam hazeh v'loy b'olam haba. Why do we want to torture people? This is the story of Passover. Comes the Torah and tells us that on the very night when Israel embraced the blessings of freedom, when it embarked on its journey towards autonomy and liberty, it simultaneously learned that the Passover freedom offering could not be prepared even with one single drop of water, which represents resolution and containment. It had to be prepared only through direct contact with fire. Other offerings you could cook, you can boil, put in a little water, put it in a pot. Here, no water, no pot, only fire. Why? Is this freedom? Because freedom is the ability to be truly yourself. What is freedom? Freedom is the ability to be fully yourself, which means fully human. And what does it mean to be human? To be human is to be a finite creature who is moved by a sense of infinity. A human being created in the image of God, and God is Ein Sof, God is infinite, senses the presence of endless mystery, of endless infinity, of limitlessness. And therefore, to be human is to be moved by the infinite, and therefore to never be completely satisfied with the status quo. Adam la amal yulad, Eliphaz declares to Job, a man was born to toil. We constantly seek and yearn for change. And when change comes, our celebration is short-lived by the search for yet another change. A new void has to be filled. And we are now challenged to overcome the new void. Why are we never satiated? This, according to the Hasidic masters, is not a horrible trait of humanity, that we're just crazy gluttons who just always want more. Since we were created in the image of an infinite God, so every human being in the core of his or her identity senses that there is always something greater, deeper, and truer than my present condition. To be human is the powerful experience of a finite creature being called, being moved by an infinite reality. So therefore, to live a free life means to never be satisfied and complacent with your present state of existence, to never be satisfied with your personal growth, with your moral achievements, with your spiritual accomplishments, with your good deeds, with your beautiful and noble actions, thoughts, and words. To live in genuine freedom means that you don't allow even one drop of water to slake your thirst and to silence your quest. You don't even allow a pot to contain and limit your inner fervor and passion, to continuously generate the kiss between heaven and earth, between soul and body, between the infinite and the finite. You would think, okay, I'm not going to mix in water, but at least let me put it in a pot. What is a pot? A pot contains the fire. A pot channels the fire. A barbecue is not even a channel, there's not even a container. It's pure fire. The night of freedom, you would think, what is freedom? Freedom is get me in a pot, put me in water, let's relax. Comes the Torah and says, that's superficial freedom. Real freedom is the freedom to be truly you. The freedom to express your full, deepest self. The freedom to know who you are and live it. And who are you? You're a piece of infinity. And therefore you dream of infinity. There's a fascinating medrash. You can look at it in your PDF. It's a beautiful medrash in Koheles, in Ecclesiastes. V'gam hanefesh lo tamali, the soul never gets filled. Like the medrash, Moshlema adover doime. Li'ironi shenosa bas melech, im yavi la kol ma sheboilam einam chashuvim la klum shei bas melech. Kach hanefesh ilu eves la kol ma adane yoilam einam klum lo shehi min el yoinam. He says, a simple man, a peasant, married a princess, the daughter of the king. And he always feels guilty because whatever he brings her, all of his gifts are meaningless to her. Because she grew up in royalty. She grew up in the home of a monarch. So what is he going to give her? You know, he finally gets her the tennis bracelet for which he saved up 10 years. Doesn't mean anything. She grew up with it. So he's always looking to be able to satisfy her more. The medrash says the same thing as with the soul. We try to make ourselves happy. So we try to go on vacation, and we try to barbecue, and we try to sleep, and we try to relax, and take bubble baths, and nurture ourselves, and eat, and drink, and enjoy, and we ask ourselves, it's not working. Why is happiness so elusive? Why is fulfillment so elusive? Where is the serenity? I have everything right. Summer is coming, right? So summer, some people, they develop the perfect dream. They have a place in the Catskill Mountains, and they have 3 trees in front of them, which they don't have in Brooklyn, and they're all excited to have a tree in front of my house. If they would live in another place, it wouldn't be a big deal, but in Brooklyn, you have a tree in front of your house, and they're all excited, and it's Sunday afternoon, and they're barbecuing. Tzliyesh, everything is perfect. The right sauces and the right juices and the right drinks and the right company. There's nothing missing. And yet they know that there's an inner emptiness. There's sometimes an inner void. Why is happiness elusive? And the answer is because until we do not acknowledge the existence of our soul, we can never discover who we are. And we can never discover what we need to be fulfilled. And that's what the Medrash says. You have to understand your soul. You can give your soul all of these delicacies in the world. Shehim min ha'elyonim. A soul needs transcendence. A soul needs godliness. A soul needs infinity. A soul needs truth. This is a soul. So the night of freedom, the Torah says, how are you going to celebrate your freedom? It's Liesh. Other nights you cook. A person can't just live with tension. You have to live with resolution. You have to be able to make peace with what you have. You have to be able to be satisfied, to be happy. If not, those of you who are tense people and are never happy, you know how difficult life is, and the people around you, it's very difficult. You can't be so obsessive. You become obsessive, you become meshuggah, you become fanatic. They say the prayer for patience here in New York is, God, give me patience and give it to me now. You have to be able to sit back to embrace. But the night of Pesach, you want to know what freedom is? Don't look at this constant yearning within you as an enslaving factor. On the contrary, it's because you sense the presence of infinity. And therefore you're moved to grow and increase and increase and increase. And the higher you will reach, the more you will discover how distant you are from infinity. And the greater the passion and the zest will be. Take a look, a quote in the Rishimas, the words. I want to have a few lines of the words of the Rebbe, of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, source number 5. Rishimas Chaveres Lamed Zayin. Dafketzli, it has to be roasted, source number 5. Ki la'olam behisiga adam adrega gavaya, yishtoike klamasha l'maylam izah. Here is the principle. Whenever a person reaches a high level, he will yearn for something beyond. Ki b'kedusha ein soif. Because in holiness, there is infinity. V'talmidei chachamim ein le'em menucha. Aliyos ad ein sof. V'oz yiyah, then there will be tzeno rena. The verse says in the Song of Songs, go out and see. So the Rebbe says, tzena, go out mehakelim. Go out of your container, go out of your pot, and you'll see. The ein inyan mashka hamamshich lamata. There's no liquid that pulls you downwards. Ki aidei hala magiyim l'madrega yoser, l'madregas yoser nailas ma'adei hamshacha. Because through elevating yourself, yearning upwards, you reach much higher than through bringing it downwards and containing it. So tzena, on Passover, you have to go out of the pot. You have to go out of your container limiting you. And then you'll be able to see the beauty, the depth of the endless yearning in a person, which is a reflection of his and her oneness with an infinite reality, with an infinite God, with Ein Sof. I want to conclude with a short story. There was once a student, a secular Jewish student, who was beginning to rediscover his Jewish roots and study about his Jewish heritage. I heard this story many years ago. I'd never verified its source, so I can't take accountability for the story. I didn't hear it from the student himself. I heard it many years ago. The student once went into the Lubavitcher Rebbe for a private audience, and the Rebbe was writing, sitting and writing. The Rebbe would write a lot, and the Rebbe usually used a pencil, and the Rebbe would erase a lot. And he would finish writing, he would write on the sides, he would write under the lines, on top of the lines, upside down. It wasn't just, continuous writing without interruption. The Rebbe wrote and erased and rewrote very often. This student observed this as he came into the room, or at some point when he was there. So he turns to the Rebbe and he says, Lubavitcher, may I ask you a question? I know you're a brilliant man. I'm sure before you write something, you think of what you're writing. So when you write something, it must be true. It must be valid. But then I see you erase it. You erase it. So what's happening here? if you thought it, I mean, you're a brilliant man like you, I'm sure it's true. So why are you erasing it? And the Rebbe told him, when I wrote it, it was true. But a few moments later, I grow. And as I grow, there is now a deeper truth. And the previous word has to be erased in the presence of yet a higher truth and a deeper truth. Have a good night and a very happy Pesach.